Miss Brenner. I hope you're all doing well and staying happy and healthy. Today we are going to be talking about allusion in literature. So for our notes, I recommend that you take your own personal notes, either do split screen, so that way you can open up a Google Doc at the same time and take your own personal notes, or you can do it on pen and paper. That is what makes you the most comfortable. But I do just recommend, because we will be using allusion and the 3 different forms of allusion throughout the remainder of this unit. So without further ado, let's continue. Alright, so what is allusion in literature? An allusion is a reference, typically brief, to a person, place, thing, event, or other literary work with which the reader is presumably familiar. As a literary device, allusion allows a writer to compress a great deal of meaning and significance in a word or phrase. So, probably a lot of times when it comes to literary devices, you might think to yourself, I don't do this. This is just some kind of fancy thing that a writer throws into a story. But in reality, we use allusions a lot when we are having conversations with people. So people often make allusions in everyday conversations, sometimes without the realization that they're doing it. And so sometimes they do it even without knowing the material to which they are alluding. Typically, these allusions are in reference to popular culture, including movies, books, music, public figures, and so on. So the examples that I have of allusion, you may not say in your everyday conversation, but I'm sure you have heard of them before. His smile is like kryptonite to me, from Superman. She felt like she had a golden ticket, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I wish I could just click my heels, The Wizard of Oz. If I'm not home by midnight, my car might turn into a pumpkin, Cinderella. She smiles like a Cheshire cat, Alice in Wonderland. And then I have a whole other side of examples. I'm sure you've heard of somebody being called Einstein before. Or maybe you allude to one of your teachers being Voldemort from Harry Potter by saying, he who must not be named. So there are a lot of different examples, like sitting in your thinking chair from Blue's Clues. You may be more likely to make allusions to things from pop culture nowadays, or from things from television that you've watched with your friends, kind of like an inside joke. I know that I've heard my mom say before, when she would have to drive me to school when I was in middle school, that she was driving Miss Samantha, and that's an allusion to the movie Driving Miss Daisy. That would be her joke with people who were her own age, because they would understand the allusion and I wouldn't. So Greek and or Roman mythology are also commonly used as resources for allusions in literature, directly or by implication, due to the familiarity most readers have with classical myths, their stories, and characters. We also use biblical figures quite often in allusions as well, because people are just so familiar with biblical mythology and biblical references. So you have like Achilles' heel, which is alluding to the weakness of Achilles, the arrow of love, which is an allusion to Cupid, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, which is an allusion to Atlas, and it goes so on and so forth. So why would an author use allusion? Well, these are going to be our 3 different categories for why an author would use allusion. They use it quite frequently, but with different purposes. So the first one we're looking at is character development, by associating them with other well-known and familiar characters or archetypes. They're doing this to build the understanding of the character's purpose and motives in the story, so we as the reader better understand, most likely, our protagonist or antagonist. The context, through paralleling 2 things to compare or contrast their central literary elements. So for context, to give the audience a better understanding of where the story may or may not be going, or the purpose, the theme behind the story. Plot development, by referring to the plot and or character of another work that helps the reader understand more about the story's events or character motives. So we're going to look at examples for each of these categories, and we will be looking for examples in our own stories that we're going to be reading in the future for these 3 categories. So let's talk about character development. So my example is from A Brief Moment in the Life of Angus Bethune. If you have never read this short story, it's great. I highly recommend it for your silent reading. So my example is, because someone had to coax a plurality of more than 500 seniors to forego casting their ballots for any of a number of bona fide Adonises to write in the name of a cow. So this reflects on the perspective of the protagonist, who in this story is Angus, and toward his personal appearance, the appearances of others, and how outward beauty impacts one's personal value. Through this one sentence, the reader gains a deeper understanding of Angus's self-loathing as well as his deep desire to look like others. So, as you can tell from this moment, he does make an allusion to Adonis, which is the god of beauty. And so he is comparing himself, and maybe, because every time I do this story, everybody immediately in the title says his name is Angus. That's a cow. Yes, that is how he feels about himself, that he is much like a cow. So, as far as character development, it gives us a better understanding of how the character feels and views themselves and the world around them. Context. So, let's talk about Robert Frost, Nothing Gold Can Stay. I'm sure that you've heard this poem before. This allusion helps to connect the human experience to the poet's lament about the cycle of life and death, beginning and end in nature. So the poem goes, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. The allusion to Eden also provides an interesting context to the poem, in that the reader can infer that the fall of man was a natural and possibly inevitable occurrence, adding to the appreciation of life in its temporary existence. So as far as context, we gain a better understanding as to the deeper meaning of what the author is trying to get across because of these allusions. And then lastly, we have plot development. So this is a segment from a story. And in this story, we are talking about how the reflection of the breakdown of disparity of images between her environment and the experience as an African-American girl in the 1940s in Ohio. She is in this segment explaining how when she would read, I don't know if you've ever heard of these picture books called Dick and Jane, but they were meant to help young children learn to read. But the problem is the reflection in the images and the reflection in the story didn't fit what she was experiencing in her own life at the time. And so it was extremely confusing to read about these stories of things that seem so insignificant in comparison to the survival and reality of life, that the context of Dick and Jane is just not there for her. So it's pretty much the opposite of allusion in her experience. And that's why she's using it as an allusion for the average reader. That the images of the cat goes meow and come and play with me, with Jane the kitten will not play. See mother, mother is very nice. Mother will play with Jane. Mother laughs, laugh, mother laugh. See father, he is big and strong, and father will play with Jane. Father is smiling, smile father. See the dog. It was just a bunch of words on a page, and that's what she wants to express to you, the reader, which is why she jumbles all the words together to create this feeling where you have a mental disconnect from the story. So that would be an example of plot development and allusion used by the author to get that experience for you. So those are our different forms of allusion. There is a second video on allusion that I would also like you to watch that I have linked in the folder through Edpuzzle. I want you to watch that one because it goes over some more examples, and these examples are more visual examples. They are not just limited to literature. So we're going to look through those examples with Disney, so that way we get a better grasp of how authors use allusion in stories to do these three sections, which is character development, context, and plot development. If you have any questions for me, please send me an email. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.